Before we begin, I want you to sit with something. An African king looked British diplomats in the eye and said, "The slave trade is the ruling principle of my people. It is the source and the glory of their wealth. The mother lulls the child to sleep with notes of triumph over an enemy reduced to slavery." That king was real. That quote is documented. His name was Ghezo. This video is not going to be comfortable. We are not here to protect anyone's feelings or give anyone an easy pass. We are going to look at all the facts. Who participated in the transatlantic slave trade, who profited, who resisted, and who looked the other way. Because the truth, the full truth, is the only thing powerful enough to actually honor what was lost. Long before a single European ship touched the West African coast, slavery existed in Africa. But here is what people conveniently leave out. It was not the same institution. Enslaved people lived within kinship systems. They had a real chance of freedom within their lifetime. Status was not defined by race. Children were not born into permanent chains. It was still wrong. But it was nothing like what was coming. Here is the argument that makes people uncomfortable, and we are going to face it head on. When people say Africans sold Africans, they are using a concept of African identity that did not exist at the time. These people did not call themselves African. They were Yoruba, Igbo, Fon, Wolof, Asante, Mende. Rival ethnic groups were not their people, any more than England selling Ireland would be Europeans selling Europeans. But, and this is where we refuse to look away, that framing does not erase what some African kings did. They knew those people were going somewhere from which they would never return. They knew those ships were not fishing boats. Some of them simply did not care, because the guns, the gold, and the power were too valuable to refuse. That is the betrayal. Now, let's talk about how this machine actually worked. Europeans could not simply walk into the African interior and start grabbing people. They needed African rulers and middlemen to do that work. So they did what they always do. They studied the landscape, found the cracks, exploited the rivalries, armed one side against the other, and made themselves indispensable. They were not innocent traitors. They were strategists engineering a catastrophe. Here is the trap that swallowed entire kingdoms. The moment Europeans brought guns into West Africa, the rules of war changed permanently. Any king who accepted them could crush his rivals. Any king who refused became the next victim. So, kingdoms sold captives to buy weapons, sometimes from greed, often from survival. Europeans designed that cycle deliberately. Understanding this does not excuse anyone. It reveals how the trap was built. There were African kings who tried to stop it. In 1526, King Alfonso I of the Congo wrote a desperate letter to the King of Portugal. He described how free men, noblemen, even the sons of noblemen, were being seized and sold to white men under cover of darkness. He pleaded for it to stop. Portugal ignored him. His letter still exists. His people still disappeared. And then there is Dahomey. The kingdom of Dahomey, in what is now the Republic of Benin, was not a passive participant in the slave trade. They raided neighboring peoples, particularly the Yoruba, specifically to capture people for sale. They built their entire military economy around it. Women warriors, royal armies, annual raids. The whole apparatus of Dahomey's power ran on the sale of human beings to European ships. When the British told Dahomey's King Ghezo to stop in the 1840s, he did not apologize or pretend it was complicated. He told them directly, the slave trade was the ruling principle of his people, the source of their wealth and glory. He even signed a treaty to end it in 1852. Then he broke it in 1857 and resumed raiding. Business was too good. Power was too sweet. The last slave ship to arrive in the United States, the Clotilda, docked in 1860, after abolition, after the Civil War was already brewing. The enslaved people on that ship were purchased directly from Dahomey. Long after the world declared the trade illegal, Dahomey was still selling, and American buyers were still buying. No law, no treaty, no British naval blockade was enough to stop what profit had started. Dahomey was not alone. The Asante Empire in present-day Ghana was one of the most powerful kingdoms on the continent, and one of the most active suppliers of enslaved people to European traders on the Gold Coast. Their wars of expansion in the 1680s sent a steady stream of captives to the coast. The Asante also resisted British abolition well into the 19th century. The records confirm this. But we deal in the full truth. So, here is what gets erased. Not every African kingdom sold people. Many fought back at enormous cost. Villages built fortifications and warning systems to protect their communities from raiders. The Mossi kingdoms resisted the trade for generations. Countless stateless societies across the continent rejected slaveholding entirely. This resistance was real. It simply does not fit the narrative that either side finds convenient. The resistance did not stop at the shore. When Africans were loaded onto ships, they did not go quietly. They organized hunger strikes. They launched rebellions. Some jumped into the ocean rather than arrive in chains. Historians estimate 1 in every 10 slaving voyages faced a serious revolt. Europeans even avoided certain coastal regions because the people there fought back too hard. That fact deserves more space than it gets. Between 1501 and 1867, nearly 13 million African people were kidnapped and forced onto ships. Almost 2 million died in the Middle Passage before ever reaching land. Portugal and Brazil were responsible for nearly 6 million of those people. Britain transported more than a quarter of everyone taken. No pre-existing African slave trade was close to this scale. Europeans did not join a trade. They engineered a machine. And let us be clear about what Africa actually lost. The slave trade directly and indirectly caused Africa to lose tens of millions of its people. People who would have lived, worked, built, and reproduced on the continent. Some regions were so thoroughly depopulated that entire communities ceased to exist. Africa was left politically fragmented and economically broken, perfectly positioned for the colonization that arrived almost immediately after. Think about what this actually means. A mother putting her child to sleep, not knowing that by morning raiders could come. A son marched to a coast he had never seen, loaded onto a ship, never to return. An entire continent hemorrhaging its most able-bodied people for centuries. And somewhere in that horror, some of the men who led those raids looked exactly like the people they were selling. In 2019, Ghana's president formally apologized to Black Americans for Africa's role in the slave trade. The government of Benin, built on what was the Kingdom of Dahomey, has gone through its own painful reckoning with what their ancestors did. These are not Western accusations. These are African leaders looking their own history in the eye and saying without flinching, we were part of this. That is courage. So, what exactly was the first betrayal? It was not weakness. It was not universal. The betrayal was this. In the moment when millions of people needed their leaders to protect them, some chose guns, gold, and power instead. They sold the future of an entire people for temporary advantage. The people who were sold pay for that choice for generations. Some are still paying today. And here is what should disturb you most. This is not ancient history with no modern parallel. The betrayal did not end with abolition. In part 2, we are going to show you that African people are still being sold today to the UAE, to Myanmar, to Libya, through deception, through desperation, and through greed. Different century, different language, different packaging. The trade changed its name. It never stopped.